Hello everybody, this is a short introduction to how we can create more impact through business. We'll look at how impact can be created through different parts of the business model and also some additional things that entrepreneurs who are intending creating impact have to think about and apply in order to be successful. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where I'm recording this lecture, which are the Yagara and Turrbal people, and pay my respect to their elders past and present. So before we start talking about impact enterprise, let's quickly have a think about impact. What is impact? And there's a risk that impact is used as a piece of jargon and we use it without actually really thinking deeply about what we mean. So this quote, which I like from the Malago Foundation, is that impact is a change in the state of the world brought about by an intervention. So it is a change. And when we think about the state of the world, we have to take a holistic lens. So we're not just talking about social or economic, we're also talking about cultural and environmental. And so when we're talking about changes in the world, I think it's really useful to think about the lens of the Sustainable Development Goals because they represent this holistic view of all the things which contribute to a meaningful and sustainable life for individuals, communities, and indeed our whole societies and civilizations. And it's important to note that while we talk about the Sustainable Development Goals as global goals, these are also relevant at the very local level. So whether we're talking about poverty or hunger or environmental well-being or energy transition or reducing inequality, these things are as important in our local communities as they are for the global community and countries far away. So when we also talk about impact, it's this point about an intervention. And it's important to recognize that everything that we do has an impact. And that can either be a positive impact or a negative impact. So what we eat, what we buy, who we buy from, how we treat people, our colleagues, our friends, how we interact with community, how we travel, the energy we use, all these things that we decide on a daily basis have an impact. And the challenge laid down by the Sustainable Development Goals is how do we ensure that the impacts we make are positive rather than negative? And this is the same for businesses. Businesses create interventions to create value as a key part of their operational model. So when we think about impact enterprise or impact businesses, it's really about saying, how do we ensure that the business models that we build and the approaches that we take maximize positive impacts and minimize negative impacts? So we can explore how this works in practice by first thinking about how a business actually works. So to begin with, most businesses start by an entrepreneur or a group of people having an idea and setting up a business. Those businesses then draw on natural resources from the environment and also the skills and capabilities and labor of people. And through the process of those different inputs, they create goods, products, and services. It's also worth noting that in the production process, the business also creates byproducts or waste or externalities. Basically through the process of production, what else is created and pushed aside? And that's important because we'll come back to that later. The goods, products and services are sold through the marketplace and the business receives financial income as a result. The income goes to pay wages of the people who work for the business. And then there's a decision for the owners about how much profit they take and indeed how much of that resource they might want to redistribute either to community or back into the wider world. So if we look at this basic model, we can now identify the areas where we have an impact. Firstly, we have an impact in terms of the resources we use, how we use them, and the waste that we produce. Secondly, we have an impact in terms of what we decide to do with the profits and surpluses we create. Thirdly, we create other impacts through the way that we design and run our business model, the way that we treat people, the other benefits that we unlock. And lastly, we create impact, or have the potential to create impact, through the nature of the goods, products and services we develop and deliver. So in terms of creating impact through business, here are 4 areas where we can think about designing a business model that realizes positive change. So now let's have a look at each of these 4 areas and some examples around how businesses are creating impact, positive impact, through the way they design and operate their businesses. The first principle around how we use resources, how we manufacture our products and services, what we do with our waste. The first principle around creating positive impact by doing no harm. And a really good example of impact enterprises which commit to minimizing their negative impact and creating positive impact through their manufacturing processes are certified B Corps. So this is a third-party certification which you only receive if you demonstrate a really high level of performance and practice in a number of areas through your business. And much of that can refer to the materials that you use, your supply chains, how the people you buy materials from treat the land and treat their people, how you deliver your products and services, how you package them. And so there's a whole number of areas here where we can be conscious of our impact through our manufacturing and fulfillment processes. And indeed, many B Corps actually seek to have a net positive impact in the way that they manage their supply chains and manufacturing processes. An example is Guayaki, who produce a soft drink, yerba mate, and the plant, which is the base ingredient for this, grows in the Atlantic forests down in Argentina. But those forests are heavily dependent on rainfall, which originates in the Amazon. And recognizing the value of that rainfall to their business model, Guayaki actually pay or transfer finances to indigenous tribes in the Amazon to retain the rainforest. So rather than have a negative externality, they recognize that the rain from the natural environment is critical to their business model, and they seek to protect that by transferring finances to the stewards of that land. The second way we can think about creating positive impact through a business model is how we use our surpluses and profits. So a good example of a business who uses their enterprise to create resource to solve a problem is Who Gives a Crap. Now, Who Gives a Crap are an Australian social enterprise who sell toilet paper. But while the toilet paper doesn't have an impact itself, it certainly has a use, but doesn't have an impact, Who Gives a Crap take 50% of all the profits they make and then support sanitation projects in developing countries. So they're using their business as an economic engine to resource impact in other areas. Another example of a business who uses their business model to create resources for external impact would be Humanitix. So Humanitix are a ticketing platform. They're an Australian-owned company, and all the profits that they generate from selling tickets go into educational charities. So again, this idea of using the business as an economic engine to resource other activities, projects, and operations which can lead to impact. The third way we can think about generating impact through our business model is how we design our operations and our business approach to create more benefits from what we do. So how we build in other areas of impact from the basic operations. An example of this is Koto. So Koto is a catering firm and also has a chain of restaurants in Vietnam. It was founded by Jimmy Pham, who is an Australian Vietnamese entrepreneur and is at the front of the screen. Now, the thing about Koto is its primary products and services are food and hospitality, but they have built in impact to the company model by providing scholarships and training programs to street kids who otherwise don't have any support, stability, shelter, or transition into stable livelihoods. So they use the business as a means to provide that support, training, and stability and transition to people that who are otherwise excluded and at risk from any number of vulnerabilities. Another example of a company that has really maximized benefits from the design of its business model is Elvis and Cressy. So Elvis and Cressy are a business who make luxury luggage and also accessories. But what they have done to maximize the impact of their business approach is that all the materials they use are either disused fire hoses, which would otherwise go into landfill, or leather offcuts. So they're actually using their business to create a high value product, but also maximizing their impact by reducing waste and resources which would otherwise end up in the ground. And as a result of their work, not one single fire hose, decommissioned fire hose, has gone into landfill for the last 5 years in the Greater London area. So they're having a major impact on waste by creating something quite beautiful. The fourth way that a business can create positive impact is through the nature of the products and services it creates. So this is an area where a lot of the innovation happens. Key problems which need to be solved, underserved markets, market failure, systems failures. How do we use entrepreneurship and innovation to really lean into those spaces which otherwise have been unresolved? An example of this could be D-Light. D-Light have really tackled the issue of the lack of energy in many rural areas, primarily in Africa, and where often only about 20% of homes have access to electricity. So they have created a very affordable solar lighting system, which also then has built off other devices which can be used, such as phones and even small household appliances. And through a very innovative way that they have also trained up new salespeople and provided employment to reach those remote communities, they've had an impact on over 100 million lives. Another example of an impact enterprise who creates change directly through its service is Sehat Kahani. Sehat Kahani are a medical service which provides a consultation and medical support to remote communities in Pakistan. And it provides those services through a lot of female doctors who have become married and are no longer practicing in urban centres and enabling to use their skills. So through the medium of the business, they're actually solving two problems. One, underused expertise and labour of female doctors, and two, providing medical services to communities via the internet who otherwise wouldn't get access to that health support. So it's an innovation in a service using technology which solves multiple problems. So that's just an introduction of how you can design a business and have impact in multiple areas, those 4 areas. I'm just going to wrap up now by providing a few thoughts on practice. Firstly, businesses aren't constrained to just take in one of those approaches. And indeed, some of the most effective and optimistic businesses use all of those mechanisms to maximize their impact. An example of this would be the Eden project in the UK that was originally built in a disused quarry, and they have created the largest environmental education centre in the UK, having a direct impact through their service. But also, they are very conscious of how they employ people and where they procure their goods and services from, and they have enabled any number of local businesses to start up and succeed as a result of being strategic around their procurement. They also, with their profits, support the development of local social and community enterprise. And of course, they think very deeply about any waste that they create and adopt a circular economy method to all their business operations. So this is a business which is creating multiple forms of value using all those four approaches. It's also important to note that companies don't have to do everything right from the beginning, and their impact can evolve over time. So a good example of this is the impact enterprise Little Yellow Bird, who started out really just trying to create highly sustainable and ethically produced garments. So their supply chain only purchased raw materials from farmers who used only rainwater to grow cotton. They then used manufacturers which had the highest standards in terms of both labour practice and sustainability practice in manufacturing. And as a result could offer a highly ethical and sustainable product to the market. But as they got more successful, they used some of their profits to then offer scholarships for young girls to get access to education in the communities they sourced their materials from. And as they grew a little bit more, they then started to develop some innovative technology which started to track basically the provenance of all their items and garments throughout the supply chain. And then indeed they also started an advocacy campaign to make consumers more aware of the negative impacts of the garment trade. So they didn't do that from day one. They did the core things first, and as they got some success, they built more impact into their business. So just like a company can innovate over time, a company that focuses on impact can build up that profile of benefits over time as well. An important point to note is impact enterprise is not a specific type of organization. Many organizations are now using business models and approaches to create a positive change in the world. So we're increasingly seeing charities who trade. We're seeing cooperatives and community-owned enterprises which are setting up business models to create impact in their local communities. We're starting to see joint ventures between mainstream businesses, social enterprises and charities. We're starting to see major corporations who are becoming more conscious of their impact and building it into their business models. So when we talk about impact enterprise, I think it's helpful not to think about the type of organization. It's more the approach to any value creation activity. It's the change in the way that we do business rather than a type of business. A key point about anyone who wants to engage in creating impact through their business is intention. So you have to have a really clear idea around the change you want to create if you want to build a business model which is going to deliver on that intention. So you will hear a lot around the impact enterprise space, this notion of purpose or purpose-led businesses or entrepreneurs with purpose. But really that intentionality is needed because if you're going to create a change in the world, you have to think very carefully about how you're going to do it. The flip side of intention is accountability. And one of the key things that impact enterprises do, which is perhaps different from mainstream businesses, is a commitment to really measuring the impact they create. So if you exist to deliver an impact or you are focused on creating positive change, unless you actually know how you're performing in that respect, then really your idea just remains an aspiration. And if you're going to claim for your marketing that you're having an impact, you should be mindful of being accountable to your customers and stakeholders that the change that you think you're delivering is actually real. So impact enterprises, like a normal business, is going to have sound financial management. An impact enterprise will also have sound impact management. And to demonstrate this point, let's go back to Little Yellow Bird, who we had a look at earlier. This is an impact report, or part of an impact report they created a couple of years ago. And you can see that what they've done is make sure that they've measured the various impacts they have, be that around labour or around the environment, around the chemicals or reduction in chemicals that they used. So they've been very careful to make sure that the impact they're creating is transparent and real. One of the last points I want to make is the whole notion of working in social change or environmental change, cultural change. We're talking about systems here which are highly complex. So this graphic in front of you is a logic flow or a systems map of obesity. And you can see around the issue of obesity, there are so many different factors, social, environmental, economic, that provide a context of why obesity happens. So if you were setting up an impact enterprise which wanted to tackle this issue, you can see how aware you would need to be of all the various causes and effects before designing an intervention and potentially going into a place where you're going to have a negative impact rather than a positive one because you haven't fully understood the context. So impact entrepreneurs, in addition to being good risk takers and being creative and good business people, the thing that really defines impact entrepreneurs is the respect and ability to engage with complexity. And that often means having a high degree of empathy, engaging with stakeholders, and trying to understand a situation before jumping into it. This also means that impact entrepreneurship is challenging some of the traditional ways we've come to think about entrepreneurship. And by this, I mean that rather than thinking about entrepreneurship as very much an individual endeavor, you know, almost like a hero who takes on the world, who builds a business, very much the model that we sometimes think about in terms of technology in Silicon Valley. The approach to impact entrepreneurship is something which is far more respectful of collective approaches. If we are going to take on the biggest problems in the world, it will be a challenge, and we do have to work together on these things and recognize that different organizations, groups, institutions, communities all play a role in achieving good, sustainable outcomes. So when we think about impact entrepreneurship, it's not just about having an intention. It's not just about having a respect for complexity. It's also having an appreciation for collective approaches and how we can work more effectively together. So impact is changing the way that we think about enterprise and entrepreneurship. And also society is starting to demand more from business and entrepreneurship. So this dashboard in front of you comes from the Endelman Trust Barometer, which is an annual survey across multiple countries, which tries to take the pulse on where society is in terms of its attitudes and expectations of people who hold power across government, media, NGOs and business. And you can see here in Australia that now the vast majority of people are starting to expect companies to deliver more value to stakeholders than just shareholders. And indeed, a majority of society is expecting companies to use their profits and to use their business models to improve conditions in communities. So impact is changing the way we think about entrepreneurship, but society is demanding that business also changes the way it operates. And I'll just leave you with this, that I would say that impact entrepreneurship is not a niche thing. It's not something which is just for the people who want to do good in society. It actually represents the way we have to start thinking about our economic model as a whole. The world is increasingly crowded. There are well over 7 billion of us now. We have systemic challenges to tackle, such as climate change and inequality, and not, of course, with COVID happening recently. So we have to start using business in a far more responsible way, and a way which actually benefits more people in the world and creates a sustainable and safe world for generations to come. So this isn't just good for society, it's actually about creating the basis for a sustainable economy as well. And this idea that impact is not a nice to have, but actually represents the next evolution in capitalism, is something which I firmly believe, and invite you to think a little bit more about yourself. So that's it. Thank you for listening. And if you would like to know more about our work at the Eunice Centre, please find us on Twitter or the Griffith website, or indeed our Medium account or Instagram account. My name's Alex Hannant. I've enjoyed sharing some ideas with you today. Thank you. Bye-bye.